Welcome to Also Consider This, the podcast where we value nuance, perspective, and knowledge so that we can all be
Also clever thinkers.
I'm the second most famous Alastair on the podcasting scene.
And my name is Guo Feng.
So today we are diving into something a little closer to home, and that is the F&B industry again. If you've been online, you've seen headlines about cafes, restaurants, hawkers, all shutting down left and right in this year.
Yeah, and I think almost every story about all these closures has always pointed to a common topic, which is rent. How rental prices has been skyrocketing, but what we really want to know is that really the whole picture?
Yeah. So to help us make sense of it, we've got someone who's seen the ups and downs and late nights of this industry firsthand. So our guest today is a close friend of ours from our school days, and he's worked in the F&B industry for many years. Since 20 odd years ago, during our teenage years, he's been doing all sorts of work in the seafood restaurant to earn money to play more D2, Diablo 2, and World of Warcraft at land shops. And then since then, he has moved on to bigger roles, more concepts, including a Hong Kong style cafe and other Singaporean cuisine. And now he's operations manager across the restaurant group. So we welcome our friend Timothy Han, our first guest.
Hey. Our description of you just now, the short intro, so largely accurate, fully accurate, or
more or less, it's F&B, so everyone kind of does everything. The lines are kind of blurred.
Kind of
not in a Robin Thicke way, just a normal way.
Yeah, kind of how we know you also is like you seems to like bao ka liao in your line of work.
Yeah, and then because it's also a family kind of business, right? So there's, from my impression of it is that if the business does well, then the family does very well, But if it's tough, it can get very tough. This line of work.
I think it's quite intrinsic because many F&B businesses are largely family owned. Even some listed ones at this point are still family owned, and I think that it's the kind of skill set that translates well as a trade because you grow up around it. You fundamentally understand the hours are ridiculous. Weekends don't really exist. Public holidays are
like where
something you get when you're on school.
Yeah, I mean, when you say weekends are public holidays, I remember you mentioned something like Chinese New Year that doesn't really exist in the household. It's like the inner circle of family does their greetings and then it's back to work again. Or Christmas Day is something like that as well, right?
Yeah. So, we still do Chinese New Year, of course, but we'll definitely, pop back at the restaurant and make sure things are fine. It's not even an expectation. It's just, it's your own thing. You want it to run well. You just put more effort.
So you have to put more hours into it, and it seems as though where people enjoy their time is actually when you work lah. That's why that need to always be on top of things, even though when people are
sure. It's exactly the same as the hospitality industry as well, or any tourism related job. I'm sure.
I would actually consider this as kind of part of the wider hospitality industry, right?
Definitely. It's the same kind of challenges, same kind of seasonal dips and highs as well.
Yeah, because ultimately, when someone comes into your restaurant, it's besides the food products, there's still the hospitality of hosting these people when they are in your premises.
Yes. It's F&B has fundamentally, besides just fast food, has always been a third place for people. So I think if you're going to be a third place, right, no matter how you design it, there's still going to be an element of hospitality involved.
Yeah. So you mentioned third spaces, right? So I think a lot of people recently also bemoaned the loss of third spaces, right? Like the closure of the projector recently, people sort of mentioned that it's like we lost another third space. And then related to this is a lot of F&B brands have closed recently, right? So
a few big names.
Yeah, a few big names, right? So we got you in because there's something that has happened a lot in recent months. I think even last year is also, in 2024, it was also something that happened quite often. And so just to give a bit of background to it, right? Just a quick summary of what's most recent. At least 11 Michelin-starred restaurants in Singapore have closed in the past 24 months. And then with many of them closing in the past year due to the cost. And this includes 10 that dropped off the list in the 2025 Michelin Guide.
Yes.
And then with 9 of them having shut down, and then another one that closed
Just last month.
just last month in September. Yeah. And then, of course, that is the more lauded high-end side of the market, you can say. And then in the more casual space, in 2025, we lost the Privé Group, we lost the Burger and Lobster chain, we lost the Egg Slut sandwich chain. And then other ones that we lost were like Ka-soh restaurant, and then ramen restaurant like Kanadaya and Hokkaido Ramen Santoka. And the Manhattan Fish Market as well. Manhattan Fish Market is also gone.
I think the first thing that caught our eyes is all these closures. So is it really more jialat like this year in 2025 than compared to last year? Or is it just because the media started to focus on it? That's why
I believe we are seeing an outsized amount of closures because we had an industry disrupting event, or rather global industry disrupting event known as COVID. So in COVID, of course, there were a lot of closures, but of course, nobody batted an eye because, that's normal. Everyone's at home, a lot of restaurants can't function. And so you suddenly have a glut of empty commercial spaces in the market. Great time for everyone to come in, things are cheap. Then when the market progresses back to normal standards, when we start looking at the kind of aggressive kind of rent percentages, which people are, I won't say people, okay, newer business owners are kind of shocked by. I think because many of them may have entered after COVID, they have a kind of, I won't say unrealistic, but it's kind of unexpected for them.
So what you're saying, from my understanding of what you're saying, is that rents either stagnated or dipped during the 2020 to 2023 window.
Correct. So they were catching basically the bottom of the market.
Okay, so the rent prices dipped, and then when they rebounded extra hard because of the dip as well.
They were actually making up for lost time.
okay.
So because you have to remember as well that just because there's COVID doesn't mean global inflation isn't in effect,
and
right?
in fact,
So
inflation
because
has
of COVID,
gone
we are
into
pushing
worse.
the thing back, and I would say especially there was a lot of government intervention during this period. If I recall correctly, there was a scheme to kind of assist businesses in paying rent first, so at least they could keep going on.
Yeah, and also subsidizing the workers'
Exactly.
pay and stuff like that.
If even with the subsidized rent, with the relaxation of some MOM laws on time banking for your staff, if you were still unable to survive, then it would be highly unlikely you'd survive, even if you reopened after that.
Yeah. So it's just because I had the impression that COVID really filtered out businesses that were long-term unviable. So I felt that it was a thing that because it sort of accelerated failures, therefore I had the impression that the remaining
It's like the survival of the fittest,
and
whoever is left over.
the remaining players in the market, I thought they would have survived much longer than they have. However, it turned out to be the other way around. It's like even longer, more established names also dropped out of the market during this last 12 months or 24 months.
The last 12 months have been pretty bad because we're looking at global supply chain shortages, which pushed everything up. So even events as discrete as the Ukraine war pushing up global wheat prices, wheat is a fundamental contributor to other sources of food as well, will have eventually pushed the entire market up.
Yeah. So okay, we'll look at the other operating factors in a bit. However, because the headline and the most eye-catching, easy story that many people have put out, be it influencers or social media people or the news media outlets, they all seem to focus on the rent aspect of things, because I think I think it's the most visual impact when the closure happens, right? You go into a mall and then you see this very big portion of the mall boarded up because that your former favorite F&B outlet is no longer there operating. So like, for example, Egg Slut in Scotts Road, right? It took up quite a big frontage of the building. And that's a very visible visible absence on the shopping street. So do you think that it is a very, very, or even the majority factor of F&B businesses closing during this time?
I believe rent is only one of the factors. However, it's the easiest to understand. Everyone can understand rent. When you talk about rent prices increasing, it's a very visceral reaction. I'm sure many Singaporeans as well, even though you're not involved in the business, you will experience rent. Most people, for example, rent before their first house, before their BTO. I think even a slight increase in rent, they understand it's just unavoidable. Your salary may not be going up, but your fixed costs are going up. Everyone understands on a very visceral level the kind of squeeze.
And when you talk about rent increases, right, do you feel that the increase of rents reported are exaggerated? Because, for example, the Ka-soh closure, right, or they claim that their rent went up from 12,000 to 15,000 a month. Is that something that is within the ballpark of what you hear in the market generally, or is it like a more extreme case?
Okay, so 12 to 15K would have been what, 3 out of 12? That's what, 25%?
Yeah.
Yep.
25% increase? Okay, 25% increase just as a headline is incredibly high. But we don't know before that how long was their rent maintained at 12,000. Did they experience a rent freeze in the last 5 years? Because if so, you shouldn't be very surprised 5 years later your landlord increases the rent by that. And it also, do we have any background on the relationship between the tenant and the landlord? Because as much as it's easy to imagine a situation where landlords are greedy, even if landlords were greedy and they felt that the business as a continuing entity would continue to be quite profitable, they wouldn't want to jeopardize a safe haven.
Okay, but let's put it on when you said that they wouldn't want to jeopardize the existing business, right?
They wouldn't want to jeopardize an existing stable tenant.
Yeah, but what if they assume that, or they had whether it's an accurate or otherwise calculation, that if a replacement tenant came in, that they would be able to afford that higher level of rent? Is that a possibility? Is it common, or do landlords overextend themselves sometimes?
I mean, there's always going to be negotiation in when it comes to your landlord increasing rent, but I do believe that when a landlord makes an increase, they actually, on some level, do believe they can fill the space, and if they believe they can fill the space, then you have to ask yourself, is my business actually viable? Because expecting the landlord to not be a maximally profit-seeking entity would be kind of strange as well, right? So the malls, they are REITs, they answer to their shareholders. The shareholders want maximum value. In the same way, business owners, we try to get maximum value as well. I think it would be really unrealistic to expect your landlord to not be a profit-seeking entity, because it's not a social enterprise.
In terms of the lease periods and the terms given these days, right? Are they more demanding of tenants these days?
I'm going to bring up a slightly related point. Have you heard of the Fair Tenancy Framework?
No, we've not.
Okay, so the Fair Tenancy Framework is something that the government put into place a while back. I can't remember exactly when. But what they were trying to do was to get more fair conditions for tenants, right? So this is obviously a step in the right direction, and I laud the principles behind it. And the idea was that so your landlord couldn't impose a situation where I charge either GTO, which is a percentage of sales as rent, or a fixed amount, and they gave you a whichever is higher kind of calculation. So what it did was try to not continue to kind of penalize the business for doing too well, right? So for many businesses, especially F&B, we'll be paying GTO to the landlord, which is a percentage of sales. So when we hear reports of, let's say in your theoretical case, the rental going from 12K to 15K, is it a floor increase or is it a projected GTO increase? So because
I think we don't really know
correct.
the specifics.
We don't actually know, because as a headline, it's easy to talk to say that, okay, that's just it. But if I think my business is doing really well and my landlord has a maximum cap on the rent regardless of how well I do, some businesses might think this is excellent. Yeah, if you don't want it, I'm going to take it.
Yes, I understand. Because I also the 12 to 15K rent was what was claimed by Ka-soh when they were closing. There was also another. These numbers actually are not easy to come by, and also like I think it's easier for them to disclose the numbers because they are closing the business. So there's no, I can assume that there's less of a pressure to keep the terms secret because the entity is going to disappear. At the same time, I've also seen another article about McPherson mincemeat noodle, bak chor mee. So basically, my understanding was they were in a coffee shop along McPherson Road, and what happened was the original landlord passed away, and his family inherited the coffee shop. And to sort of ensure even split amongst the people who inherited the property, they sold the property away so that they could cash out and have an even split, which also meant there was a new landlord. And the new landlord, of course, upped the rents. And initially, the hawker thought that he would move out, but eventually he stayed because, at least the reports stated that he stayed because, he found that other coffee shops elsewhere were more expensive. And then there's also the hassle of re-establishing himself in a new location. So instead of being along McPherson Road, he will have to move to like Jalan Besar and things like that. So I think, do you think that landlords are also very aware of such conditions and sort of push their tenants as far as they can because of it as well?
So my counter question would be back to my prior point. Why would they not? They are profit-seeking entities. If they believe the market can bear, they will push it. This is exactly why national utilities are not privatized, right? Because profit-seeking entity will seek to maximize profit. It is a business.
Fair enough. Because we are not here to. At least I am not here to judge why landlords are pushing so hard.
Right.
I feel that ultimately businesses are there to make money, unless they are like a government agency which is there to not maximize their profits, is to maximize the public good, right?
So if we pull this back to your earlier question, where fundamentally what we're asking is, are landlords pushing too hard, right? So too hard means they have a kind of distorted view of what the market can handle. But if this is the case, wouldn't it be self-correcting? Because if you have an empty space for like 6 months, and you're just paying the government tax on it while the space is empty, I'm very sure they would lower rent pretty quickly.
I think for me, a more curious person, like an average Joe, is it really that bad that businesses are forced out purely based on rent? Or is it just something that's exaggerated by like media? Because what we are seeing on news reports.
Yeah, and to add to that question, right? Because the narrative is that rents are the main factor, right? So in actual fact, in most average cases, how much would rent be as a cost of the business in general? Because if you're saying that the rent is going to be 70%,
I can't speak for everybody, but I have seen GTO percentages up to 20%. So we'll just take that as a like a ceiling for a nicer place. It could be more if you do a volume business, for example. So might be even higher, but you think you can sustain it.
So if like you're selling curry puffs, that kind of thing, is it?
Correct. And on the other hand of the scale, it could be a listed business where even if it ekes out 0.5% consistently, you'd still do it.
So it's not necessarily, it's not like what some people may imagine, like half the money goes to rent. Not as drastic as that, right?
It could be half the money goes to rent, but if you're still turning a profit and your rent is half, you'd still do it if the business model you operate allows you to do so.
Okay, fair enough. So if you're basically your point is that so long the business with the rent is making money, then why is there a big problem? Are you saying that?
Let's say I want to be heartless about it, then yes, it is. Because let's say if you took the owner's profit as kind of a salary on the business, and you be able to cover that, it's still functioning.
It's still sustainable in that sense.
Correct. if you're talking about what's back-breaking for an F&B business, yes, you can say rent, but equally you could say it's lack of manpower. You could say it's increased production costs. You could say it's restrictive licensing. That is just like I said. I do think that rent is always brought up because it's such a easily understandable issue, and it feels like it's easily solvable with regulation or with ceilings or maybe.
And it seems like
government
it's an in thing
intervention.
for media to just go up and just
I think it's easily understandable.
Yeah.
And I believe also there's a kind of feeling that it's easily solvable. Because if it's something like, I'm a bakery and I can't operate because the price of butter has gone up. Butter is a global commodity. Who's going to be able to regulate long term? Unless you turn it into a intervention on the level that some countries do with, petroleum, right? How are you gonna intervene?
It sounds like it's easier to blame it on a typical evil faceless corporation or REIT as compared to like the global market. It seems easier to blame that faceless entity.
Yes.
So it seems to me that like rent is not the only factor that's hurting businesses or F&B businesses.
For a long time with the manpower issues also.
Yeah. So besides that, so one thing I think you have spoken about is like labor. So what other pressures do you feel are causing F&B businesses to feel the pinch right now?
Labor is an interesting kind of problem, right? Because generally you have a labor problem if your business is doing well enough to need labor. So, if you're saying, okay, rental is killing me, labor wouldn't be a problem because your sales ideally would not be high enough for you to require that much labor. Then again, you have the other extreme where if you feel that to operate your business, you require a ton of cheap labor, then maybe it's not such a well-designed model after all, right? The government has been pushing a very long time on manpower automation. So, for example, you're looking at little robots in serving food in cafes and all. It doesn't work for every business concept or every brand, but it's something. I don't think that the labor problem will go away because fundamentally in Singaporean society, an F&B job, if you're not the owner, doesn't...
it's not attractive.
It's not attractive in terms of hours. The pay is not great as well. And it's not seen as a long-term career. It's seen as something, kids do in their holidays, in between, something short-term. Or if you're in between jobs, maybe you need something to pick up the slack for a while.
When you talk about labor, right, I think in some ways, labor can be dressed up in a more interesting manner as well, right? So, for example, if let's say you run an ice cream shop, and you could say that my artisanal handmade ice cream is because I put my back into it, and there's minimal machine intervention in the production methods, therefore it creates a certain product. Then I thought that you could sell that as an angle to actually jack up your prices, and the manpower cost for that may actually correspond accordingly, right?
You can do that, but then we run into what I believe is the main. I believe you'll run into the same problem that the projector had, which is your product is good. Is there a market that can sustain your product? Is there a market with enough disposable income to support your concept? Because the question of is there value is a very individual question, right? Especially for food. Everyone has their own taste. Everyone has their own level of disposable income. So just because you put a lot of effort in doesn't mean that there will be a market large enough to support you.
So
right?
are you talking about things like concepts? Like, for example, nose-to-tail dining works in some markets, but in Singapore many years ago, it didn't really seem to take off.
I mean, personally, I love nose-to-tail dining. I feel that it's sustainable and it's largely good. But I also realistically understand not everyone is comfortable with the idea of eating innards. Not everyone's comfortable with the idea of eating a pig's head. In some cases, if you have high cholesterol, we best probably don't eat as much innards. Yeah. So, like I said, it's not that people like or don't like your idea. It's kind of a thing. But even if they do like it, do they have the disposable income to support that?
So,
right? Because in this climate, we're all talking about cost of living expenses as well. We're talking about global inflation. Families are feeling that.
So besides the inflation, the usual inflationary like cost of living pressures kind of talk. So is it also the case that Singaporeans as a whole, as a market, we are just becoming more picky? That if we go out to have a meal, we really want to spend on like good stuff, and therefore some of the businesses may not have that great of a concept or that great of a draw for people to actually choose them over others.
And to add to that, right? I think certain businesses perpetually have queues.
Yeah.
Right? Like Din Tai Fung always has a queue, despite the fact that they have multiple outlets everywhere.
McDonald's.
Yeah. So is it because people just like to repeat it and therefore it's part of like...
Or is it because we are boring?
I feel it goes back to the sort of 101 business school thing of the value proposition. Are you creating enough value for people to want to stay with you? Are you providing the consistency that is valuable to them? I can't remember who said this, but I definitely heard it somewhere that someone in F&B said that Singaporeans are not foodies. And I completely agree with that. Because we still want what we're comfortable with.
Well, you literally expose Singaporean food people like that, Like, because we expose Singaporeans to be not foodies.
We're not foodies in the sense that we're not adventurous to try something new.
But we are foodie for like our local fare and stuff like that, but not the other
But you
stuff.
can argue that any culture is like that. You have like Italians wanting to burn your restaurant to the ground if you started breaking pasta in half while cooking. So, everyone...
But to that counterpoint, right, in the past decade or so, there have been so many more mala shops. And people who would argue against you saying that, hey, if we are not adventurous enough, then what's with all the new mala shops?
We're not adventurous, it's still Chinese food. I'm not saying that all Chinese food is the same on adventurous, but in terms of taste profile would be different. But in terms of what you can understand as a concept of food, it is.
So your argument is that it's against the argument in return is more of like it's adjacent.
Correct. It's familiar enough to work.
Mm-hmm. Having convenient options, actually, especially through like delivery apps or like all these. I mean, I've heard it also in like US. I'm not sure whether it has entered Singapore yet. Like ghost kitchens. Has it also changed how an F&B has to compete with all these factors, especially like if let's say this other option is easily accessible, therefore that besides being priced out due to rent, they are also competing with maybe other outlets that they are constantly on delivery apps, or they are always being recommended on delivery apps and all this kind of stuff.
So if we go back to delivery apps and how they function, delivery apps kind of are a rental. They can go up to 32% commission on your price. So in case any of you are wondering out there why your Grab is suddenly way more expensive than your dining price, it's probably because the restaurants are adjusting the price to compensate for the commission they have to pay, Grab or Deliveroo or whatever it is.
Based on what you just said, that it sounds to me, in reality, is that rent is not the only factor. And the reason why I moved into this topic and asked you in for this is because the Ka-soh story actually is quite personal to me.
Okay.
So Ka-soh used to be at Amoy Street, in the shop house in the corner unit. Yeah. And they used to have this, they used to be very famous. They used to be full house, they even took the unit next door. And they had lots of people going and there's like celebrity pictures all over the wall. Because if you had a foreign singer come in to perform, you want to feed them something that is local and not going to harm their throat. You definitely won't serve them char kway teow because it's too oily and spicy. you will serve them fish soup. It's something that would definitely suit their schedule. It will not hurt the stomach and things like that. And therefore, you saw like photos of like Jackie Chan and all that all over the walls, right? For a start, I thought the business totally went away because they were no longer at their existing location for a start. And then when they, about a month before they closed, a relative of mine brought us there. And I was surprised that they were still around.
Right.
Yeah, I was kind of like hopeful that...
Oh, shoot. How do you find the food?
That's my point. I was very unhappy with my experience. I was made more unhappy because there's a factor of nostalgia that was very unsatisfied. So there were occasions when we went in many years ago where you ordered one big bowl and then you order the next one, you would find that the first and the second bowl tasted very close to each other. They were almost exactly the same. And that is a level of consistency in a very well sorted operation, right? But when I got there, the food, well, for a start, the environment was not welcoming. It was the space was echoey. The aircon wasn't really turned on. Well, it was on, but it wasn't cool enough. The whole shop smelled like the kitchen. And to add to it, the fish soup was really fishy. Okay. Yeah, so to me, my assumption is that it spoke of the ingredients. Probably it's not as fresh as it could be, right? And the service also, the service I experienced that day, right, is not something that, if not for the fact that they were an established business and I had that nostalgia factor, I wouldn't have accepted that level of service, right? Like we had dishes on the table, like our leftover dishes when we were done. They did not even ask us if we could have the plates removed. They just took it away. Yeah, that kind of level of service, which even when back in the day, they wouldn't do that. So I was very unhappy with what I experienced that day. And therefore, I felt that the whole episode about the rent being, the cost and the rent being part of the main issue of why they closed, right? I felt that it was a very unsatisfying report. Because if you went into the Google review, even if as a journalist, right, you went into the Google review and just looked at the reviews, you could tell that there were signs that the business was just...
There seems to be like more to it than
there was
just the rent.
Yeah.
I think it might be useful, especially for like laymen in this case, right, to think about it from the other direction. Because all we've been discussing so far is the point of rent is killing business. Rent is killing all F&B businesses, established F&B businesses. But I don't think anyone has thought long and hard about why some businesses keep going on and on and on. Some have been around longer than Singapore's been independent, honestly.
Like pre-war businesses.
Pre-war businesses, they're still around. You know, if you know where to look for them, they're still around. And no one says anything about how they're still around. If the environment was so crushingly, backbreakingly difficult, I think we'd see a lot less of them. Right? So at this point, I think it's good for people to have a think as well about why are these businesses still going on and on and on. Right? Because if it was that bad, you'd see even more big names close down. I believe there was a statistic made known to the industry quite a while back, even before COVID, that the average life expectancy for F&B businesses was an 80% closure rate within 3 years.
Wow.
So this is even pre-COVID. So it wouldn't be surprising to me that most people don't make it. So most businesses don't make it.
You make it sound like it's like the death of a pet fish. Like, you know, like 80% of the eggs that come out don't actually survive, kind of thing.
Yeah, but we have to look at this in the broader business environment as well. I don't have the statistics for how many IT companies start and fail, how many startups start and fail. So it looks devastating, but I don't think we have the statistics to compare realistically what is the success rate for businesses in general in the Singapore environment.
Yeah. So, however, IT business is not going to be as emotionally tied to average consumers as your stall or hole-in-the-wall shop, right?
They're way more behind the scenes. So I think it's just, you can't care about what you don't see, right?
Yeah.
So I think we have already started um, going more into the other factors. So if like rent isn't the only factor and it's also not just labor, so how then can like laymen like us, how do we understand these closures besides what the media is trying to tell us?
I believe what Alastair said just now is the easiest way for you to understand the closures. If I'm going to be brutally honest, you vote all the time with your tongue and your wallet. If it was good enough, you'd go back. They wouldn't have a problem. Even McDonald's at that standard is good enough for you to keep going back. They have a value proposition. The proposition is good. The value is still there. You keep going back. Even if it's for, I don't know what they're doing now, samurai burgers or something, right? It's still good enough for you to go back. So the idea is very fundamental. You know what you're eating. If you like what you're eating, you're going to go back and eat it. It's very open. It's very democratic, right? So like you brought back the case about the projector shutting down. Yeah, maybe people like the idea, but like the idea versus enough
Paying
value,
for the idea is
enough
another thing,
value
yeah.
to pay for it is something very different.
Yeah, I would draw parallels to what. So Rory Sutherland is one of the bosses for Ogilvy in the UK, like one of the top executives in there, and it's he's very happy to share his views of things. So his very commonly used phrase is like the Church of England. You know, especially the Church of England in the UK, it's like everyone wants it to exist, but nobody wants to take part. You know, so I think that it sort of struck me because when some businesses sort of went away, it's because there's nobody there. Like people wish for it to still be there, but they are no longer there.
People are most truthful, in my opinion, with their wallets.
Yeah.
When things are difficult, you will see what really has value to a person.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, I would like to add one more factor of closure. So recently, the Caesar cut curry rice at Bio Crescent closed. They quietly closed, and that's partly because the owners are old and they're retiring, and there's nobody there to take over the business. So I think I think sadly, that is also a reality of this line of business. When it's a family business and it's not run in a way where potential inheritors can feel that it's a good living, then it will naturally close.
The business, so there are a couple of factors for this. Oftentimes in the papers, you may hear a hawker going, "Oh, I'm going to sell my business for $1 million or 100,000, whatever have you." But if the value of the business is locked within the person, it makes it impossible to sell. Especially if they try to impart their skill set, but the skill set may not be something that's easily taught.
So it's somewhat artisanal, you're saying?
Yes, I think we as far as when it comes to cooking, we still have to recognize there's some value in certain dishes being artisanally done. I believe the sushi industry in Japan kind of runs on that pretty much, where they follow the chef, where for certain high-end restaurants, they follow the chef, not the brand.
Like Sushi Jiro is about the boss, right? The botak fella.
Exactly. So even if he was willing to sell it, where would the value be?
Yeah. And I think for me, how I see it also is that there are also certain, it's a very Singaporean kind of mentality sometimes, is that because I want the next generation to have a better future than myself. So like some of these owners may not actually want their sons or their daughters to kind of like take over because it's a back-breaking job, right? So it's like it's a
Furthermore, without expanding, there is a limit on how much one store can earn at any point of time. If they felt the maximum profit was that for that store was only able to sustain, let's say it's a couple, they can sustain 2 people comfortably. But let's say they had 3 kids, how would they then split the profit from that into 3? Even if they're running it with exactly the same standards, exactly the same queue, How would they?
Like even though you have more manpower, but you only have one
exactly.
store,
It
you
doesn't
can
solve
only,
it doesn't solve the problem.
Okay.
Then this idea came up to me. It's like maybe you are talking about sushi jiro, but what if the system the thing can be systematized and transitioned into a more cookie cutter kind of
Of course
product?
it can. Where do you think your yakun came from?
Means I had to like make it very standard SOP type of thing. No artisan skill involved, that kind of thing, or just minimal or a lower level of skill involved, but you can still sell off using the brand. Is that what you think is possibly a viable thing to ensure that a brand exists?
I mean, it's fine. You can do this. It's essentially what most big chains have done. There's not a question of can you do it or not. It's a question of can you scale it. It's This stops becoming a F&B question and it's become a business development question.
Does it mean that to make rents less of an issue, then will it be will it be a business adaptation and development question that is like perhaps smaller footprints or different operating models, as you mentioned, right? Do you think that's a more fundamental question that operators should ask themselves rather than just be very engrossed with the rent issue?
I feel that many new operators who come into the business may be idealists, right? Because food tends to attract a certain kind of person, and it's a bit of a romantic view, with the cooking and the sweating over the stove and devoting yourself to the mastery of a dish. But that's such a small part of it. It's a critical part of it, but it's really a small part of it.
So you're referring to that sort of level of like artistry and the romantic notion of artistry.
There is a place for artistry, but artistry is just a part of it, right? You still need someone to man the cashier's till. You still need someone to serve the dishes. You still need to do some marketing.
And then when it comes to the many foreign F&B outlets that have come in recent times, right? Particularly, I think some people have this. Some people are complaining about, there's so many of the same type of Chinese restaurant chains coming to Singapore. Mm-hmm. Do you think they're here to stay, or do you think it's like the market will just decide for them?
This is kind of a complex question, because when you talk about Chinese chains coming to Singapore, you also have to ask yourself, how many of these are maybe Chinese MNCs that need a place to invest in, to grow to? How many of them are maybe come from individuals who need a place to park their money, who can invest into Singapore? So when you're asking about the inflow, demand is one thing, but because Singapore is an open economy, we are always going to be kind of an investment destination as well, and the market has to be able to bear that. Now, obviously, more competition makes it more difficult, but there's no way to stop. It's very difficult to try and limit investment into Singapore, right? Because even if it's Jeff Bezos decide to open a burger chain here, it may be completely, and the market doesn't need it, he can still bankroll it. It's got nothing to do with the market at this point. It becomes a case where this is an investment vehicle.
So basically, you are saying that there's a chance that local operators will meet unfair competition just because of the nature of the economy, and also perhaps even political decisions to say that because we need a bigger picture.
It may not even be a local political decision. It may be, for example, a foreign country only allows investment into 3 other countries and we happen to be one of them. I believe that sometimes people don't really chew down to the bone this idea of the market is the market and these are market forces. There's not something you can rail against. The reality is going to be there on the floor. Either we move with it or we get trampled over.
So I think the bigger question, I think also like what all the media reports about all these closures has been talking about is that I think we say that the easiest solution is we look at the easiest way to look at all these closures, looking at the rent. But then coming back to this whole idea about looking at the market and all this kind of thing. So what other interventions can there be, or do you just feel that just let the market let the free market decide for all these operators, and then survival of the fittest? Or can there be something that is done at a policy, or what other support can it be done to ensure that these businesses survive lah?
I think when you ask this question, it also is asking, do we want inefficient businesses to survive because they're Singaporean? And I feel this is actually quite a difficult question to answer, right? So are we going to use national funding to subsidize businesses which, left to the free market, will not survive? Businesses which are not social goods, because I would argue that F&B social good would be hawker centres. F&B as a social good would be hawker centres. So once we move out of this hawker centre category, and you kind of want to swim with the big fishes, there'll be sharks. I believe that if the government wanted to intervene, they could. Is it the best use of national resources? I can't answer a question like that. But, this is national resources are everyone's tax money. It's your tax, it's my tax, it's, everything.
It becomes a political question.
It is a very big question because we're no longer asking about F&B. We're asking about how protected should Singaporean businesses be, since we are talking about local F&B. How protected should Singaporean businesses be? And if you protect these businesses, would they then be non-viable businesses? So, because, for example, we like to take an earlier example, Chang Kee. I believe they opened in London or something, right? And then they tried to operate over there. And I can't remember whether it worked out or not. But would it be better for you to use your assets to try and expand businesses which have proved they are tough enough to survive in this environment? Or should you shelter certain sectors or businesses just for... Actually, I don't know what we're shouting. Cultural preservation? I would find it a bit hard to...
Yeah, so there's like multiple things that we have to consider as a society itself that we...
Because what is a public good in itself is the question here.
Yeah, what is a public good? I personally, and just my own view, I would argue that hawker center F&B businesses are a public good because they were created to give a minimum baseline of food to people.
And there's some form of a cultural tie to local culture in that sense.
Correct.
Yeah.
But when you're a restaurant with the ability to expand, the ability to get funding, get foreign investment, or whatever, local investment, the ability to scale, if you're going to have access to these tools, why would you then need protection?
That's a fair point. Well, before we move on, you mentioned Old Chang Kee in London, right? So yes, I just did a quick search. The Old Chang Kee is in Covent Garden, and it's got 4.4 Google reviews, 4.4 star on Google reviews.
Not bad.
That's
Holding
quite good,
up against the Cornish pasties
Yes.
and Greg's.
Yes, exactly. So you had a hot take before you go on. You had a hot take before you came in. Your hot take on businesses complaining about rent.
Yes. All businesses face challenges, they face problems. And to be a business owner is to receive the chance to receive supernormal profits from an inordinate amount of risk, right? So that's the general understanding. Why is your boss paid more than you, right? Because he bears the risk, he gets most of the profit. So why would you be complaining about rent when you were the business owner? You basically said that I'm going to go in, I'm going to try this. There's a chance for me to make it big. There is a price for this chance. You deal with rent, you deal with manpower, you deal with business climate. If you felt that these things were too unreasonable for you to deal with, then maybe opening a business, regardless of F&B or not, may not have been correct for you because the risk appetite you brought into this or the understanding of risk you had going in may not have reflected reality. Nobody is going around saying we want rent to go up, right? It's the free market. Rent goes up because it can go up.
It sounds to me that based on what you just said, the F&B industry really needs to innovate harder.
yes, they definitely need to innovate harder. There's a limit on how much innovation you can do, right? Because it's not like we have agentic AI frying your char kway teow, right?
I don't think it's just tech, right? I mean, it could be just how you operate it, how you sell it, choosing a different way to sell it. So instead of selling your zhi through a stall with tables, you sell it through a takeaway stand, like a wok hei in a shopping mall. Aren't these also innovations?
They are innovations, but I think at the end of the day, it's kind of the same thing. Are you providing value that people want to buy? It's a difficult question to answer, but the question itself is not complicated.
I think for me right now is that if you were to condense what you have shared, let's say if I were to ask one question to condense whatever you have shared, is that, so if someone were to start a restaurant today, what's one thing or maybe a few things that you would want to tell them that they should be aware of so that they can survive?
Not just for F&B, but I believe for any business, right? You need to be fully aware of the value you're creating from your product. And if it's valuable enough, it will work itself out. But value creation is not just from having the product. It's also about, marketing your product. It's about making connections. It's about knowing where your supply chains are. It's so many things that goes into creating value. Right? So yes, create value, but I have the best char kway teow in the world is only one part of value. We didn't discuss this earlier, but a lot of closures are by like non-F&B people. They come in, they're like influencers, they're like people who zhou bolan and then open.
To be fair, lo and behold, guy actually puts his hands into it as well.
He puts his hands into it, but it's one thing to put your hand into it and have 10 million behind you and put your hand to it and have 10,000 behind you. Yeah. Because you have so much money, you can be in the business, but you can still step out to do your strategy, to do your thinking. You don't need to sit there and fry. Right?
Unless you're manpower.
You can work on the business because because being in the business is a choice. It's not a must due to your constraints.
Right. I think also when you spoke about the social media part, that was something that the social media influencer one, that kind of brings to mind, like, especially during COVID, because of social media, they make it look as though like, I just started this, then they, because of their clout and stuff like that, they just managed to get people to come and
the
support
narrative
them.
is just a narrative. It's not reality.
It's not the reality, yeah.
But then that's the first wave of business, right? So it's very common to hear of like celebrities starting an F&B business.
F&B, there's like hair salons and
beauty
and then
they will
any business
and then they'll use their pre-existing base of fame and followers and fans to come and patronize the business the first time around.
It's not a replacement for subject matter expertise. It gets them through the door, doesn't keep them in their seats. F&B has a special thing where the value of your item is evident very quickly. Because you eat, you know. Someone eats, they know. They know, they're going to tell their friend. That's it. They don't know, or I think it sucks, they will not tell you, they'll just stop coming.
That's why food
Most
reviews
people actually
matter.
don't complain about food, People just don't go.
Yeah, they will vote with their feet.
Yeah, hot take.
Yeah.
There shouldn't be a stigma against negative food reviews because I believe that everyone has their own taste. And if you say that you respect someone's taste buds, right? Then they should be able to say what they don't like.
I agree. I agree with your hot take with the proviso that looking back at our previous episode, we talked about this. The negative review has a place in society. What matters the most is the intent and the respect in that review.
So because there have been people who just negative review for the sake of attracting attention, rage baiting lah.
I also agree that certain negative reviews are unsubstantiated. So my beef with that would be unsubstantiated reviews, or reviews where the person doing the review isn't particularly well versed in food.
Oh yes, because they see something that is made because someone poured item A, B, and C onto the bowl. They think that it's just made at that spot rather than the pre-prep that was.
It's more than that. It's like a cultural understanding of the item itself. So, for example, if you ask someone who's been eating sashimi all their life to rate ceviche, they might see it as an unholy abomination. Right? There's no understanding of what it's supposed to be. Right? So when someone gives a negative review, I believe they should at least understand what the dish is supposed to be. If, for example, the sauce is supposed to be sticky, you can't complain that it's slimy because it's supposed to be like that.
It goes back to the MasterChef Australia thing where they said the rendang, the rendang is crispy. Yeah.
The rendang,
I mean, there's dry rendang and wet rendang. Yeah, so even the professionals get it wrong sometimes. So I believe if you're doing a review, you have all the time in the world to go and do your research, You literally have the world's information at your fingertips. Just go and look for it.
Yeah. I mean, the review can be negative, but I think it also has to be be
Needs to be
respectful
substantiated.
and respectful also. Yeah.
Let's just take the Michelin guide. Every restaurant that an inspector has gone to and didn't make the guide is a negative review technically, right? And no one has an issue with that.
Or the delisting
or the restaurants that got delisted, technically that's a negative review.
Yeah, because
but no one has anything to say about it.
No, because they're not drawing attention to these so-called negative reviews. Right?
Correct. And yet, it is a negative review.
Now we are off to our closing segment because our podcast values nuance and knowledge and learning. So we would like to close off our episodes with the Today Island segment. Right, so this is a fully copycat move, all right? So I'll just give you a bit of time to think about what you've learned recently. We will have a go first. So would you like to go first, or I go first?
Okay, I will go first.
Okay.
So since we were talking about food today, right? So this came out on my feed. She's a content creator living in Germany, so she has a German husband. So she herself is not German. So then she creates content with her German husband. So there was this skit that they acted where she's like,
are we talking about German breakfast?
No, German beer though. So they are like the Germans are particularly, they are very particular about how the beer is served. So for example, if it's a Weiss beer, it's served in like a different type of glass. So the thing that intrigued me was like, so I went to find out like why are different beers served in different glasses. So actually the simple explanation is that different types of beer are served differently for practical, sensory, and aesthetic reasons. It's basically to help you enhance the experience of how you enjoy the beer's aroma, flavor, carbonation, and appearance. So if you see like a glass that's like a tulip shape, right? So it's like narrow top glasses. It's meant to force the aroma to your nose. So it's a bit like a wine, right? So you have like certain glasses that's concentrating the aroma to let you smell the aroma. So it's like usually IPAs and Belgian ales are served in those type of glasses. So wide-mouthed glasses allows the aroma to dissipate more quickly. It's usually used for lighter, less aromatic beers like lager. Lager is usually quite generic tasting and stuff like that. And then glasses that are tall and narrow encourages a tall and lasting head, so the carbonation part, the foam part, stays longer, so you can have a better mouthfeel. Then if it's a rounded glass, it gives you a thick and creamier head lah. So certain glasses are also used because of temperature maintenance. So it's like tall glasses with stems, especially a lot of those craft beer nowadays, you see them being served in those, right? It's allow you to hold the glass. It's a bit like wine lah. You hold wine glasses, you hold the glass without warming the beer too much. So this was for ales and stouts. Then tall and thin glasses let beers like lagers stay cold longer. So you see like lagers are served in those glasses.
Chunky glasses.
Yeah. And then of course, then appearance and color. So it's like things like Pilsner glasses is to show off how the brew is like. And then the last part is usually like tradition and branding. So it's like certain, especially I think the Germans are super particular about this, like certain beers have to go in certain classes because traditionally that's how they're served.
So what I learned recently, right? So this is also related to our topic of the day. Is the Hong Kong food license regime from the olden days, and how they influenced what we call certain F&B establishments in Hong Kong.
Are we talking about the Da Pai Tang system?
Yes. So the big to make it to keep it anglicized, the big license, which is the Tai Pai Tong, the big license, the Tai Pai, the Da Pai, the small
Storefront
license,
license,
and then the small license. So why do they have such names? So the Tai Pai Tong, or the big, when we say Tai Pai Tong, we usually talk about like zi cha stuff, right? Big flames. Where you would picture big flames, woks, lots of noise, seafood and poultry and vegetables, fried in a big flame and all that. Somebody slaving over the flame. So because the idea of the big license is that they basically allow full scale cooking operations. So you can deep fry, you can stir fry, open flames are allowed, right? So and of course this allows dining and takeaway. So it's a full-on restaurant, and that license is a very crucial part of allowing the proprietor to operate his business. Right? You on the other extreme end, you might have heard of Ping Sat, or the ice parlor, or the so-called ice parlors. So these places, we would normally see them selling like cold desserts, cold drinks, the icy drink,
The shaved ice and stuff like
shaved
that.
ice and stuff like that in Hong Kong. So those desserts, right? So these are called small license, Sai Pai. Those are small license. So the rule of those small licenses is that you can operate them in smaller spaces, in enclosed spaces, and the rule is that you cannot operate with a big flame, or no flames are allowed. So therefore, that's why there's the small license. And of course, they usually will sell light meals and drinks. But as the economy evolved post-war, then more and more businesses wanted to have to cook some light meals in their kitchen. So, which later evolved into things like your macaroni, your pork chops.
Then it becomes your cha chan ting.
Your cha chan ting, right? So that is an evolution because they slowly relax the rules to allow some flame in the restaurant, and that's why you have your next category of the cha chan ting. Yeah, so it's quite an interesting. It's how that licensing regime sort of shaped the F&B market in Hong Kong. Yeah, so that's what I learned recently. Quite interesting, and of course, how that licensing regime actually went into the local vernacular, to the point where even now in Chinatowns outside of China, people say Tai Pai Tong. They are talking about, wok fried dishes in a restaurant somewhere, even this, be it in London or New York or San Francisco. The idea is that when you say it's a Tai Pai Tong, you think of a big flame kitchen. Yeah, it comes from there. So yeah, what would you like to share about what you learned recently or what you learned today?
What I learned recently, I'm gonna tie it back to the topic we're talking about today. I feel that, everyone fundamentally knows, not fundamentally knows, everyone kind of knows life is unfair, right? Everybody knows life is unfair. But I believe, when I was thinking about this in relation to the rent situation, in relation to business pressures, I think that, people need to really chew and think and understand more, really what does it mean when life is unfair. It's not just unfair to where you happen to be born, who you manage to be born to, maybe whether you're born into a poor family, a rich family, born with eyesight, born with no eyesight. But if everyone really understood that life is unfair, no one would be asking questions about rent. Right? We understand this, we teach this to our kids. So maybe chew on that.
So thanks, Tim, for coming to join us on our podcast.
Yeah, being our first ever guest on our podcast.
Yes.
Hopefully not last.
Who knows? Yeah. Thanks very much for joining us on this episode of Also Consider This.
I think, as we always have said, after every single show, as we end, we always will tell you that if you feel it's worthy of your time, always share it with someone. And if you hope to engage with us, you can always leave a comment, or you can reach out to us personally if you know us personally, or you can always message us on, slip into our DMs on Instagram.
So thank you very much, and we will see you again soon.
All right,
Okay,
see you.
bye-bye.
Bye.